Part 42. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 411. Swish swish swish. Swish swish swish. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded, and dumbfounded. Those engineers were like a plague permeating the two bases. Wherever they passed, all the coalition buildings were being dismantled with all their strength. Power plants, or refineries, tank factories, radars, combat laboratories, maintenance factories, magnetic storm coils, sentry guns, etc., etc., all base buildings will be demolished if they are touched by these engineers. It is quite laborious to build a building. It requires many engineers to be busy for a long time, spending money and time to build it bit by bit. But dismantling it was not very convenient. Several engineers cooperated with each other and dismantled it in a few breaths. The speed was at least dozens of times faster than the construction. Relying on this speed, the damage caused by these many engineers in this short period of time was even greater than that of the Allied forces' large-scale attack. Large areas of buildings in the two bases were demolished. The originally strong base showed signs of decline in such a short period of time, and was even on the verge of extinction. Stop them quickly. Are you going to rebel? At this moment, both the leading besieging troops and the officers and soldiers in the two bases finally regained their composure and roared out one after another. However, this engineering soldier itself is a bug unit. It is specially designed to fill loopholes systematically. It has no mind at all. After receiving the commander's order, it is just dismantling the entire base. How can they care about their roars? Not only that, when everyone calmed down and tried to stop it, the base commander even urged it, and all the engineers accelerated the disassembly. Soon, only 2 command posts were left in the two bases. It seems like 2 polished commanders. Ah! Asshole! Damn it! The 2 powerful bases suddenly became like this. Not to mention the vanguard troops who surrounded and negotiated, the guards in the original base were all cursing like crazy at this moment. Things happened too suddenly, and such a major change occurred. No matter how stupid they were, no matter how brainwashed the commander was in advance, they all realized that something was wrong with the commander, and maybe they actually told the negotiators. The same as before, the commander has been controlled by the psychic troops. With this awareness, all the soldiers in the base did not need to wait for the negotiators to say anything. They rushed to the command post with gritted teeth, wanting to rush in desperately and beat the members of the psychic army to death. But boom! Boom! Everyone underestimated the ruthlessness of these psychic troops. Just when these troops surrounded the command post, huge explosions occurred in the 2 base command posts one after another, and the entire command post was blown up in an instant. Even the commander and members of the psychic force in the command post died at this moment. Whirring. The fire caused by the explosion was burning in the center of the original base, and the officers and soldiers outside were all stunned. Each one looked like a fool, staring at the fire blankly. Except for these the sound of flames, but no other sounds could be heard. After some time, the group of officers and soldiers finally calmed down. Under this strong stimulation, everyone seemed to be crazy, roaring and cursing. But what else is there for? It can be said that all the buildings in the entire base have been destroyed by now, and even the commander has been killed. These 2 bases are finished. He's so cruel. After seeing the whole process of the scene in the electronic video, even with Wang Ling's ability to accept it, he couldn't help but take a breath of air. Major General Lovsky didn't find it strange at all, he just sighed and explained, "When I was controlled before, you rescued the commander of Base 8, and the remaining 3 psychic troops sensed the crisis, specifically contacted by radio. They also know that with the current plan progress, they can no longer cause huge losses to the coalition forces. If it continues, they will only be dealt with by you one by one. So at that time, they had already made preparations for a common death. Be prepared, and would rather die than cause heavy losses to the coalition forces. Having said this, Major General Lovsky glanced at Wang Ling specifically, his eyes full of gratitude. For this, Wang Ling, I have to thank you, both from the perspective of the coalition and from a personal perspective. Fortunately, you were there in advance. They took the lead in rescuing me before they went crazy. Otherwise, Base 6 would be destroyed like Base 12 and Base 1, and I would die in the explosion, and there would be no Lovsky in the world. This person. Damn it, Wang Ling didn't pay attention to this kind of thanks. Looking at the bewildered officers and soldiers of Base number 12 and Base number 1 in the video, he was filled with anger. This is simply like crazy religious belief. Just like a disciple, he will go crazy and even risk his life. Who says otherwise? Major General Lovsky shook his head. Base number 12 was officially destroyed with the explosion of the command post. However, in this red alert world, it is not a fast battle. All the buildings were destroyed, and the soldiers under the banners still exist. Moreover, after receiving the order before, there is still a former one. The field team headed by Ling Zhan is fighting fearlessly on the front line. This field group had previously shot down the Wolf Group's anti-aircraft tracked vehicles and mobilization troops, showing its trust in the commander and its absolute compliance with orders. After the destruction of base number 12 and the death of the commander, Ling Zhan also observed the scene from the electronic map during the battle, and actually started to panic, as if the Optimus pillar had collapsed, and his fighting spirit suddenly disappeared. No, I didn't have time to think about what was going on, so I just wanted to retreat with my officers and soldiers and tanks. However, at this moment of the continuous battle, their target allied base has already suffered a lot of casualties. It can be said that they have fired real fire. Ling Zhan and the others want to retreat, but the allies are not happy yet, and their morale has reversed. The Prism tanks hiding in the rear launched an attack together with other tanks and infantry. After a period of fierce fighting, the entire coalition field group was wiped out. Damn it! Damn it! These bastards from the psychic army are doing a lot of harm to people. Wang Ling was so angry that he gritted his teeth when he saw the scene on the electronic map. But Major General Lovsky said, yes, if they follow their plan and quietly control a group of our commanders and team leaders, and then reveal their fangs in an instant after the battle for hegemony is over, they can instantly give the coalition and allies the military capital has suffered a huge blow, and may even be completely wiped out. However, the existence of an alien like you has disrupted all this plan. Although the coalition forces have suffered heavy losses now, compared to the plan of the psychic army, this loss is already minimal. This is a great achievement. Report it to the headquarters, it will be of great benefit to you. Ahem, you don't think so much. By the way, the general headquarters. The leader of the psychic force, that bastard Yuri, is still at the general headquarters. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 412. Suddenly thinking of the headquarters, Yuri's sinister face flashed through Wang Ling's mind, and he instantly became anxious. Yes, the psychic army is headed by Yuri. They are like crazy believers who serve Yuri wholeheartedly. This psychic army rebels. As the leader of the psychic army, Yuri's rebellion is almost a certainty. Got it? Ordinary members of the psychic force are so difficult to deal with, quietly controlling the leaders of the major field groups and even the base commander. Isn't Yuri, the leader, even more terrifying? And at the headquarters, judging by the urine of these members of the psychic army, wouldn't it be possible that they have controlled the coach? As soon as this idea came up, Wang Ling was so anxious that even Major General Lovsky was startled. Without caring about anything else, he quickly connected to the radio of the headquarters and shouted, "Coach! Coach! Chief, if you hear me, please speak back." If you hear me, please speak back. Dot. However, after a long period of time, there was no news at the other end of the radio, and no one answered, as if there was no one at the headquarters. Coach. Chief. If you hear it, please answer it. If you hear it, please answer it. Chief. Chief. How are you doing there now? You should reply. Dot. No one answered for a period of time, which frightened Major General Lovsky. He kept shouting, and his voice became louder and louder, almost hysterical. And after shouting like this for a long time, there was still no response. Major General Lovsky's heart suddenly thumped, and he had a very bad premonition. During this process, Yan Tian and all his subordinates were always there. Seeing this, his expression finally changed and he couldn't help but interject, "Is it possible that the coach has been controlled?" Major General Lovsky had a few drops of cold sweat on his temples. He gritted his teeth and replied, "It's possible. Ordinary members of the psychic force can control me. As the leader, it is entirely possible for Yuri to control the coach. Moreover, the psychic troops rebelled and the battlefield has been in chaos for so long, but we have never received any instructions from the general headquarters, or even asked, so something may have happened." This. As soon as the statement came out, Yan Tian and others were frightened. But Wang Ling bit his lip, shook his head and said, "Not necessarily." Yan Tian and others, as well as Major General Lovsky, all turned their heads to look at the late Wang Ling, as if they could hear different conclusions from his mouth and bring them hope. And Wang Ling did not disappoint them. If the coach has been controlled, then even as a puppet, there should be a response now. But now, no one responds. It is very likely that someone from the general headquarters, any other unexpected things should not be controlled by Yuri. After a pause, Wang Ling's eyes became sharp and he added, "Furthermore, I felt that there was something wrong with Yuri from the beginning. I could vaguely see the backbone on the back of his head, which was unreliable, so I asked General Liwiki to warn him before joining the battlefield. Coach, be careful about Yuri. If the coach really takes this warning to heart and is prepared, Yuri should not be allowed to succeed. But on the other hand, if the coach doesn't take this warning to heart at all, now it would be so disappointing if you have already been poisoned." After hearing what he said, Major General Lovsky, Yan Tian, and others glanced at each other, and the panic in their hearts weakened a lot. Major General Lovsky sighed, "You are the one who has the foresight." And Yan Tian asked, "Then what should we do now?" "Wait for the news." "Wait? I can't wait any longer. What if the coach is really that stupid and gets murdered? Hurry and prepare an anti-aircraft tracked vehicle for me." "I have to rush to the headquarters," Wang Ling responded. Although he judged that something might not have happened to the coach, he didn't want to just sit back and wait for death. It was too painful to wait for such news without knowing the outcome at all. Good. General Lovsky agreed immediately and was about to order the base to prepare anti-aircraft tracked vehicles. He even wanted to go to the headquarters in person, but suddenly, Chi. Some noisy sounds came from the radio, and then the coach's majestic and somewhat weak voice came out, "I heard everything you said. You are not cowardly, secretly call me stupid." Coach. Chief. Upon hearing this, whether it was Wang Ling, Yan Tian, or Major General Lovsky, they were all excited. But after the excitement, he also raised his heart, "Coach, you are now. Don't worry, I'm still me and I'm not being controlled." Yuri really betrayed the coalition. Time goes back to the second half of the night before. It was originally time to sleep, but in the headquarters of the coalition forces, several senior generals, together with many deputies and staff, Yuri and 2 members of the psychic force, were now all concentrated in the command hall, paying full attention. He looked at the 3-dimensional electronic display, which was showing an electronic video of the movements of the frontline troops. An electronic map was displayed on the corner, and many red dots could be seen gathering together, which was very spectacular. "Are you all here?" At this time, a person slowly walked in from outside the hall. Everyone turned around and saw that it was the coach, so they all performed military salutes. Yuri's eyes flickered, maintaining his usual gloomy expression, and asked, "PoortoRich, it's so late, why don't you go to bed?" It turns out that the coach's name is Rich. In fact, many people know this name, but not many people dare to call him that, and Yuri is one of them. PoortoRich nodded and said, "Aren't you guys asleep too? It's time for the coalition forces to launch a decisive battle and the war is about to begin. As the commander, how can I sleep?" Yuri didn't speak anymore, and PoortoRich didn't ask any more questions. He just came to the center of the crowd, watched the electronic video together, and waited with the others. While waiting, the Kirov airships on the battlefield were finally in place, and then under the orders of their respective commanders and team leaders, they began to forcibly bombard the Allied bases. According to Wang Ling's style of play, these Kirov airships were only intended to cause trouble and destruction. They did not expect to blow up the Allied productivity buildings. As a result, they invaded one after another and bombed indiscriminately, causing great damage to the Allies in a short period of time. Extent of damage. The Allies were also constantly counter-attacking, and dozens of Kirov airships were all shot down shortly after crazy bombing. Then, the main forces of the major field groups also began to attack. Previously, they were bombed by Kirov airships, causing heavy losses to the Allied guards, and were attacked by the Allied field team. They soon suffered a big loss, and many Allied bases showed signs of decline. "Okay, let's fight like this. If nothing else goes wrong, when this battle is over, the Allies will be defeated, and the battle for hegemony will be over. Haha, that's a good ending. The Allies want to compete with us, but their fists are not strong enough." When the senior generals saw this scene, they became excited. But the good times did not last long, and soon the battle situation took a turn. One of the generals suddenly noticed something abnormal and asked, "What happened to this field group? Why did they suddenly retreat after fighting well? A belated blessing. I wish all book friends a happy new year. May everything go well and be happy in the new year. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 413. As soon as the sentence came out, it instantly attracted the attention of everyone present. They all focused their attention on the electronic map. One staff member even directly dragged the electronic video to that area. Sure enough, he saw a large the field group terminated the attack and quickly retreated from the Allied positions. What happened? What happened? Why did you retreat? What happened? Many officers, soldiers, and staff were all a little confused and didn't know what happened. However, Yuri noticed something was wrong at a glance. The members of the psychic force in this field group disappeared. That's right, the first one to retreat on the battlefield was naturally Wang Ling's wolf group. When Wit failed to control him, he was discovered and killed. After learning about the rebellion of the psychic troops, Wang Ling immediately made a judgment in his mind, put the battle for hegemony and the Allies behind, and took the lead in quelling the civil strife, so he retreated without any orders. The psychic force has a very special status among the coalition forces because of Yuri's existence. However, some of the psychic troops assigned to the front line were killed in these days of fighting. So far, even the general headquarters has not counted which field groups are still following the psychic troops. Even if he followed, compared with the entire field team, it was not very conspicuous, so many officers and soldiers of the coalition forces in the general headquarters did not notice Witt's disappearance. The only exception was Yuri. After all, he was paying extra attention to Wang Ling, so naturally he was also particularly concerned about the situation with Werther. When he first noticed that Werther was missing, his originally gloomy eyes became even colder at the moment. Witt's mission is to control Wang Ling and let the Wolf Group fight fiercely with the Allies. It is best to destroy the Allied base at the cost of heavy casualties, so as to pave the way for their future plans. But now, Witt has disappeared, and the Wolf Group has withdrawn from the battle directly. This in itself conveys a very bad news: Witt's action failed, and the psychic troops have probably been exposed. But others are unaware of Yuri's plans and are still wondering. That's the field team from Base 15. Other field groups are attacking. What does it mean for them to withdraw? Stop guessing and ask Commander No 15. At the end of the discussion, a senior general suddenly wanted to contact frontline base number 15 to find out what was going on. Need not. However, at this time Yuri stood up and stopped him. Let it develop and just watch it honestly. I also want to see what tricks this base and this field team come up with. Of course Yuri would not let the general headquarters contact the front line. Wang Ling had probably seen through the psychic forces plan and reported it to Commander number 15. At this time, the general headquarters contacted the front line. Not to mention that these senior generals were willing to. If you don't want to believe it, just knowing this news will cause a lot of trouble to Yuri. But the senior general who just spoke disagreed, and was about to refute, but his whole body suddenly became excited, and then his eyes changed, becoming as gloomy as Yuri and the psychic troops. Okay, I understand, just watch. At this moment, it was actually behind Yuri that a member of the psychic force took action. He quietly used his psychic power to control the senior general, and finally killed his idea of contacting the front-line base. Those who can stay and work next to Yuri are naturally the best among the psychic troops. This kind of mind control is almost invisible. No one at the scene except Yuri and the two psychic troops knew that the senior general had been controlled. Now I basically look at the electronic video with confusion. And Yuri's status in this base is very special, not even worse than the coach. Yuri has just spoken, and the senior general who proposed contacting the frontline base has also agreed, so the others have no idea and can only remain silent. Just observe the development of the situation. As for PoortoRich, he just frowned and remained silent during this process, with no intention of expressing his position. The other fronts were still engaged in firefights. After observing the Wolf Group for a while, the electronic video moved to other places to watch the battle. Not long after watching the battle, someone suddenly shouted again. Huh? There's action. That light spot is action. Pull over and have a look. A staff member quickly dragged the electronic video and showed it to the Wolf Group's area. As a result, they found that each of the Wolf Group's anti-aircraft tracked vehicles carried a mobilization soldier and quickly moved towards various parts of the battlefield. The remaining troops directly he turned around and retreated towards the city's defense line. This is... Are they crazy? What are they going to do? What does it mean to leave the Allied base without attacking? Many generals and staff were confused, but Yuri gritted his teeth and vaguely guessed something. This was probably a deployment for the psychic troops. Sure enough, the electronic video was dragged and locked on an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle heading to the nearest front line. The anti-aircraft crawler vehicle was seen speeding all the way, breaking into the K9 unit of Base 16, and without any explanation, killed the man directly. Psychic Force member. Not to mention that, a man stepped out of the anti-aircraft tracked vehicle and after talking with his team leader for a while, even the field team stopped fighting, similar to what the Wolf team did. During the whole process, only members of the Psychic Force were killed. Everyone could easily guess that this was probably targeting the Psychic Force, so they all looked at Yuri with different expressions. But Yuri clenched his fists, stared at the electronic video, and asked, "What does he mean? My men are working hard to help them fight on the front line, but he wants to massacre my men. Is this what he wants? Are you going to rebel?" It can be said that he was obviously biting back, but in the electronic video, Wang Ling's actions did look like a rebellion, and he slaughtered members of the psychic army. This group of onlookers who didn't know the truth immediately thought that Yuri and the psychic army were the victims. Everyone, looking at Yuri's gloomy eyes, felt a little scared. "Sir, don't worry, I'll contact base number 15 immediately and ask them to give an explanation." Another senior general tried to appease Yuri and asked the frontline troops to give an explanation. But Yuri still refused. "No. I want to see how this field team and this base can target my psychic troops. Just watch and don't contact them." But the senior general who spoke was hesitant, but looked at Yuri and didn't ask for much. Who made Yuri the victim? He said so he had no choice but to obey. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 414. Yuri said this with a really indifferent attitude. He wanted to see how Wang Ling would make trouble. That's what they say in words, but in reality it's not. He was actually worried that if he took the initiative to contact the frontline troops, his plan would be exposed, that's all. Yuri is really depressed now, so depressed that he almost wants to get angry. Wang Ling's deployment was obviously aimed at the psychic troops and he started a hunting plan, but as the leader of the psychic troops, he could only watch. If he can't contact the frontline base, he can only hope that his psychic troops will be smarter. As a victim, he suppressed the idea of this group of senior generals wanting to contact the front line. Yuri, together with these senior generals and a group of staff, continued to stare at the electronic map and electronic video, all wanting to watch it. Let's see how this situation develops. The further down they looked, the less calm this group of people became. After eliminating the psychic force members of the dog group at base number 16, the wolf group's anti-aircraft crawler vehicles are still in large-scale operations, and the dog group is also assisting. The purpose is very clear, which is to kill all the psychic force members. Under such actions, every once in a while on the battlefield, a member of the psychic force would die, making Yu's heart sink like water. Because of Wang Ling's existence, Yuri's plan was interfered with like never before, making the scene chaotic and completely beyond his control. Damn it! This soldier would have such a big impact on my plan. If I had known this, I would have kept him at all costs and forcibly controlled him. Yuri is so hateful that he wants to tear him apart right now. It's Wang Ling. Of course, as time went by, Yuri was not the only one who became increasingly unstable. Everyone's expressions changed. Now it is a battle for hegemony, and it is the final decisive battle. The Allies are about to be defeated. However, these anti-aircraft crawlers and mobilization troops under Wang Ling's command will dissuade those who fight in the field after killing the members of the psychic army wherever they go. The group gave up the attack. However, those field teams actually followed these suggestions and retreated on their own initiative, stranding the easily obtained victory. Can they not be anxious? Coach. In his impatience, a senior general turned to look at PoortoRich, as if he wanted him to give him a perfect solution. However, now PoortoRich has not made any statement. He just looks at the electronic video with a sullen brow, not knowing what he is thinking. At this time, the electronic video moved to the front line of the steel group again, but the situation suddenly changed. Originally, the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle of the Wolf group came to kill the members of the psychic force, but in the end, they were controlled by the members of the psychic force and stopped the attack. Seeing this, many high-level rewards have focused their attention, and they seem to be a little surprised. But then, the original members of the steel group surrounded the psychic force member, shot him to death, and rescued the Wolf Group's anti-aircraft tracked vehicle. What happened? Why is this happening? Which field group is this? Are they crazy? This scene also made many senior generals and monks in the general headquarters scratch their heads. There's a problem, however. Coach Rich seemed to have noticed something fishy. A senior general replied nonchalantly, "Is there no problem? Just kill psychic troops everywhere. This field team is also cooperating." No, that's not the question I'm talking about. I'm very confused as to why this field team is hunting the psychic troops. Coach Rich's eyes were very sharp and he quickly ordered, "Contact me immediately to the front line base number 15, ask me what is going on." Yes. After receiving the order, a staff member wanted to take the initiative to contact the front line. But at this moment, another member of the psychic force behind Yuri took action directly. A visible spiritual connection was directly connected to the head of the staff member, instantly controlling him. Yuri. Coach Rich was startled, turned around and shouted at Yuri, "What do you mean?" Even other staff and senior generals were startled, and they all distanced themselves from Yuri, stood beside the coach, and confronted Yuri. The battle situation on the front line was already abnormal, which made this group of personnel extremely sensitive, but now that the psychic force has taken control of the staff here under their noses, this almost immediately sounded the alarm for them. There is a problem with the Lihi psychic force. Since the plan has been exposed, let's implement the final plan in advance. Coach Rich, come on, join the embrace of my spiritual empire. Things have developed to this point and are completely beyond Yuri's control. He originally wanted to quietly control Coach Rich and use the entire coalition as a puppet, but now, everything was caught off guard and he had to take action forcefully. As Yuri's words fell, a red mental connection suddenly appeared above Coach Rich's head, and a series of seductive voices immediately appeared in his mind. At #UN%. Surrender, surrender, join my spiritual empire, you will have supreme glory. Submit to my spiritual empire and be used by me. My words are the truth and you cannot disobey. Surrender, surrender, surrender. Just like when Wit controlled Wang Ling, these mental powers blasted into Coach Rich's mind and immediately acted like forced hypnosis, trying to change his thinking, change his beliefs, and turn him into a Yuri-like person. Controlled puppet. When exposed to this mental interference, the coach immediately felt like he had a splitting headache, holding his head and screaming, "Coach! Chief!" This frightened other staff and senior generals, and they all exclaimed, Yuri, you want to control me? It's not that easy. Get out of here." Everyone was worried, but they saw Coach Rich staring at Yuri like crazy, scolding, and then roaring, and the mental connection between Yuri and Coach Rich was directly interrupted. Unable to control. As the leader of the psychic army, Yuri's psychic power is so powerful that it is terrifying, but he can't control Coach Rich. How could this happen? At this moment, Yuri was a little unbelievable. Hoo. While Yuri was shocked, Coach Rich took a few breaths, looked at Yuri fiercely, and sneered, "What, Yuri, are you surprised?" Yuri looked at the coach with gloomy eyes. "Yes, it's surprising. When did your mental resistance become so strong?" After all, I have to thank base number 15. After meeting their commanders, Li Wiki secretly found me that night and told me to be careful about you, Yuri. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 415. Oh, now, he had broken up with the coalition forces, but Yuri still looked calm and composed. After listening to Coach Rich's words, he asked, "Commander of Base 15? Why did he want to? Are you careful about me?" Coach Rich didn't hide anything. He snorted coldly and said plainly, "Your status in the coalition is really no less than mine. If you suddenly ask me to be wary of you, I wouldn't believe it, so I asked him why at that time. The result, Lee Wiki's answer surprised me. He just said that a captain under his command who has repeatedly accomplished extraordinary feats, and sees your ambition, Yuri, is very likely to rebel in the future. Haha, I didn't expect that this captain has such a discerning eye. It's vicious enough. The captain of base number 15 who has repeatedly accomplished extraordinary feats. Wang Ling. At the mention of this name, Yuri's face became gloomy, and he gritted his teeth and said, "This bastard was wary of me from the beginning. When I first met this person, I felt that there was something unusual about him. When I heard he went to the psychic army for training, and I wanted to recruit him. I didn't expect that he would be such a character, and it would mess up my plan. I hate it, if I hadn't let him refuse, and forced him to stay. If you control it, it won't be such a troublesome thing." After a period of annoyance, Yuri took a few deep breaths and calmed down his emotions, then asked, "At that time, he was just a lieutenant-level squad leader and insignificant. As a coach, you are willing to follow this kind of advice, don't you think this is nonsense?" Ha ha ha! Unexpectedly, the coach laughed wildly, pointed at Yuri and said, "You can't be blamed, it's so strange. At first, I thought this kind of suggestion was nonsense and didn't listen. But then, I saw with my own eyes the mind control ability of your psychic troops, and I immediately felt a sense of danger in my heart. I am the coach, the commander of the entire army. Any possible danger must be anticipated in advance." Thinking back to Lee Wiki's suggestion, in private, I began to hone my mental endurance. After a pause, Coach Rich glanced at Yuri meaningfully, "It's exactly what you said. The strength of mental power is mostly determined by innateness, but your psychic troops can all train and wear amplifying devices. Then why can't I? I can't interfere and attack with my mental power, but I can still concentrate and resist your Yuri's mind control." At this point, Yuri was speechless, but looking at his expression, it was unprecedentedly gloomy, which made people feel a little scared. The confrontation lasted for a while, and when Coach Rich and other senior generals tried to fight back, Yuri spoke again, I didn't expect it. I was lurking within the coalition forces, secretly developing my spiritual empire, trying to compete for hegemony. I control the situation at the last moment of the game, but you, Coach Rich, have been guarding against me. I admire you. That bastard Wang Ling is too far away from me. I can't do anything to him now, but I will control him myself sooner or later. Or kill him with your own hands. And now, since you have seen through my plan, I don't have to hold back anymore, you, just die." Having said this, Yuri's mental power was all concentrated in his brain, ready to release his skills. When Coach Rich saw him like this, his brows jumped and he hurriedly shouted, "Go quickly and get out of here." While shouting, Coach Rich rushed out of the command post. Although the others didn't know what was going on, they didn't dare to slow down and rushed outside. Swish! But just as Coach Rich and his team were hurriedly escaping, Yuri had already turned his mental power into shock waves, which spread outwards with his brain as the center. The shock wave of the psychic troops is very powerful. For infantry, it has the power to kill instantly. As the leader of the psychic troops, Yuri's shock waves are even more subtle and powerful. The shock waves of ordinary psychic troops are indiscriminate attacks, but Yuri's shock waves can avoid his own troops very cleverly, and can attack the enemy's troops. Tanks all deal extremely considerable damage. Yuri's shock wave was released, avoiding the two members of the psychic force behind him, as well as the senior generals and staff who were controlled, but broke into other people. In an instant, more than 10 people a staff member was affected and his body exploded immediately. Even with his remaining power unabated, he continued to break into those senior generals. Immediately, 2 senior generals followed suit and exploded. Fortunately, PoortoRich reacted in time and was not affected. At this time, he happened to have rushed out of the command post. Behind him were several other senior generals who had successfully escaped with their lives. They were now in shock. Is this the shockwave of the psychic army? It's so scary, looking back at the general command post, recalling the power of Yuri's shockwave just now, PoortoRich felt horrified in his heart. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Buzz buzz. Buzz buzz. Such a big thing has happened to the general headquarters. Of course, the soldiers and tanks stationed in the base did not dare to neglect. They took action in large numbers and rushed here. In the process, Yuri also walked out of the command post calmly with 2 members of the psychic force, plus the senior generals and staff who were controlled. When the coach saw them, his eyes lingered on the senior general for a moment, and then he gritted his teeth and looked annoyed. But now, he had no intention of thinking about when the senior general was controlled. His eyes then moved to Yuri, full of anger. Yuri, even if you control 2 of us, you only have 4 people. But we are the troops of a general headquarters. What can you do to resist us? The current situation, with the plan revealed, seems to be very disadvantageous to Yuri, and the disparity in military strength is too great. But Yuri looked confident and not worried at all. He sneered and asked, "Who said there are only 4 of us?" Having said this, Yuri stretched out his palm and patted it. "Come out, everyone. Da-da-da. Da-da-da." As he finished speaking, more than 20 soldiers wearing strange costumes and strange helmets walked out from nowhere near the general command post. Seeing these soldiers, PoortoRich clenched his fists in annoyance. It's these soldiers. You brought them to the headquarters under the pretext of training new types of arms for the coalition some time ago. It turns out that at that time, you had already laid a secret chess game. The corner of Yuri's mouth curled up slightly. That's right, now that things have happened, I'm too lazy to hide anything. Let me introduce it to you. These arms are the main combat arms of my spiritual empire, named after me, Yuri recruits. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 416. Yuri recruits. PoortoRich frowned and looked at the Yuri recruits, very puzzled. I didn't see weapons on them. Could it be that, like your psychic troops, they also rely on mental power to control the mind? Humph. Yuri sneered repeatedly, not caring how chaotic the situation was, and explained calmly, you are only half right. The main method of my spiritual empire is indeed spiritual power, but it does not mean that all soldiers can have the ability to control the mind. These Yuri recruits do rely on spiritual power to fight the enemy, but it is not control, but attack and destruction. Having said this, Yuri took 2 steps forward, patted the strange helmet on the head of one of Yuri's recruits, and said, "This is the individual combat device we have developed, the psychic helmet. They only need to concentrate on it, with a thought. You can use this spiritual helmet to launch spiritual power. Don't underestimate this spiritual power attack. With the help of the spiritual helmet, the highly condensed spiritual power is very destructive, just like a flame, and its power is more powerful than the bullets fired are huge, and the attack power of a single Yuri recruit even exceeds that of conscripts and allied soldiers. Come on, just blow it." With these more than 20 Yuri recruits, do you think you can get out of this base today? After Yuri finished explaining the combat methods of Yuri's recruits, PoortoRich stood next to him. A senior general couldn't stand it anymore. Yuri glanced at him and sneered, "Whether I can walk out of here is not up to you. It's a mule or a horse, pull it out and run around. Having said so much, you should also take a look at the soldiers of my soul empire. It's powerful." All Yuri recruits obey the order and attack. Being in the coalition headquarters is like being in a dragon's den and a tiger's den. There are dangers everywhere, and all coalition forces can kill them. But Yuri relied on these Yuri recruits to act calmly, and even after some praise, he issued an attack order before the coalition forces. This group of Yuri recruits, like dead soldiers of the Soul Empire, obeyed Yuri's orders and did not care at all how difficult this battle was. More than 20 Yuri recruits moved forward together and soon entered. Once within the range of the coalition tanks and conscripts, a fierce battle between the two sides is about to break out. Ta-da-da ta-da-da. Boom boom boom. Boom boom boom. As for the coalition forces, they had full firepower. All the conscripts and rhino tanks within the range opened fire, and there were even some apocalypse tanks and magnetic blast infantry mixed in. There were 2 sentry guns in the distance pouring down firepower. The combat power burst out from one head was very powerful. In an instant, they suppressed the group of Yuri recruits. Bear 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 bear. Raging. As for the group of Yuri's new recruits, it was exactly as Yuri said. Their attack method was very strange, using the psychic helmet to emit concentrated spiritual power. However, when this kind of spiritual power is emitted and appears in the air, it is like a rapid fire. When shot at the mobilization soldiers, it can actually cause a small-scale fire. It is extremely powerful. During the battle, from time to time, you can see many mobilization soldiers being shot and killed, their whole bodies burning with fire, howling randomly for a while and then falling to the ground, completely lifeless. Not only the infantry, but also the mental power shot at the tank had the same effect. The surface of the tank was also covered with a small range of flames. Under the continuous shooting and burning, even the tank could hardly withstand it. Loses blood quickly, and explodes directly after being exhausted. As Yuri said, when it comes to individual combat, the combat effectiveness of Yuri's recruits is indeed stronger than that of conscripts and allied soldiers of the same level. Even when these Yuri recruits are promoted to the veteran level, their firepower can even compete with that of incompetent soldiers. The level of Rhino tanks is now competing. Seeing his infantry tanks dying and exploding one after another, PoortoRich felt a little annoyed. Those who can be arranged to garrison and protect the general headquarters are naturally elite soldiers. However, after all, wars rarely occur in the general headquarters. Without the baptism of fire, the tank levels of these soldiers are generally not high, and their overall combat effectiveness cannot even be compared. Frontline field team. However, quantitative changes lead to qualitative changes. This is the general headquarters after all. The number of soldiers and tanks stationed here is very large. The pressure can crush these Yuri recruits to death. Under the concentrated counterattack of all coalition forces, the number of these Yuri recruits has increased dramatically. It was decreasing, and soon half of them were wiped out. The remaining people were all injured and were struggling to hold on. On the other hand, the coalition forces were still receiving reinforcements from afar. Under the human sea tactics, these Yuri recruits were of little use. After predicting the result in advance, PoortoRich felt a little calmer. He looked at Yuri in the distance and said sarcastically, "Yuri, is this your confidence? It seems that your confidence is not enough to let you get out of here alive." "Humph, idiot." However, Yuri did not look anxious at all. He just sneered and said sarcastically, "Do you think I am so stupid that I can get out of trouble just by relying on these Yuri recruits?" "Huh?" PoortoRich raised his eyebrows, instinctively feeling that something was wrong. "Sure enough," Yuri then said, "the Yuri recruits I introduced to you before, and the current battle, to put it bluntly, are just delaying time. Although the coalition and allied forces are fighting fiercely, this is after all in the battle for hegemony, you all have scruples about each other and cannot use weapons of mass destruction. But, I have no such scruples." Having said this, Yuri stretched out his right hand, tapped his eyebrows, and said coldly, Coach Rich, you should feel honored. You are the first to eat crabs. Now that you count the time, it's almost time. I will give you this gift as the price for seeing through my plan. Psychic storm. No. Get out. As Yuri's words fell, the air in the entire base seemed to solidify, and a kind of heartfelt fear filled the hearts of everyone present. Coach Rich realized something was wrong and shouted to lead his troops to avoid this disaster. But, it's too late. Boom. An earth-shaking red explosion appeared almost without warning directly above the tank group of soldiers of the general headquarters. The shock wave spread instantly and rushed in all directions. In a considerable area, all buildings were affected. In a fatal blow, large areas of power plants exploded across the sky, and a large number of sentry guns and magnetic storm coils were also affected, either exploding or losing their health in an instant. Even the nearby ore refineries, tank factories, radars, maintenance factories, and other buildings were all affected to varying degrees. The ones closer were directly exploded, and the ones on the edge were blown to pieces in an instant. The entire headquarters was in a hellish scene under the explosion. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 417. Boom. Boom boom boom. Under the spiritual storm, the entire coalition headquarters was in a mess. Large areas of buildings exploded. Under the rolling waves, there was not a single intact building left within the scope of its invasion. Such an earth-shattering explosion also stirred up a large amount of smoke in the headquarters, but the strange thing is that when the smoke floated, it seemed that it was all concentrated under the control of some kind of force, forming a huge one in the air. Yuri's avatar. This avatar seemed to be alive, rolling its eyes in the air, looking at the ruined headquarters, with a sneer exactly like Yuri's at the corner of its mouth, as if the god of death was looking down on the world. However, since it was composed of smoke after all, the portrait did not exist for long and quickly dissipated in the air. Hiss. Witnessing this process with my own eyes, even with Coach Rich's temperament, I couldn't help but gasp. What kind of weapon is this that can be so destructive? And that avatar, is this Yuri really the reincarnation of the god of death? Boom 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 boom. Da da da. Coach Rich originally thought that this kind of destruction was the limit of Yuri's weapons just now, but he didn't expect that before he could recover, the troops who were at the center of the explosion, whether they were soldiers or tanks, actually they are all rebelling, with a conspicuous red circle hanging above their heads, and now they are attacking everything they touch like crazy. Even Coach Rich was affected. 2 conscripts and 3 rhino tanks were all targeting Coach Rich. They concentrated their fire and wanted to eliminate him directly here, chasing him all the way. Coach Rich, however, could only retreat as hard as he could. In the process, he suffered a lot of bullets and shells and was seriously injured. Protect the coach. In the base, most of the troops were still not under control. When Coach Rich was in crisis, a group of soldiers and tanks finally arrived in time, blocked the front of Coach Rich, and exchanged fire with these rebel troops. The general headquarters was already in a mess after being bombed for no apparent reason. The sudden rebellion of these troops made the situation even more chaotic. Everyone including Coach Rich felt a little unprepared. After he recovered, he could only kill them as soon as possible. These rebel forces. As a result, Yuri calmed down. Looking at the chaotic battlefield, he kept sneering, "Coach Rich, are you satisfied with this gift?" "Damn it, Yuri, you bastard," Coach Rich glared at Yuri fiercely, and as a coach, he couldn't help but swear. But Yuri didn't take it to heart at all. He shook his head and tooted, "Instead of trying to kill me, it's better to take care of your own subordinates first. The psychic storm is caused by the psychic controller of my psychic empire. The shock wave just now was not the wave of a bomb, but the condensed super mental power. Don't underestimate the mental power. When it is condensed and exploded, the destructive power is more terrifying than ordinary weapons. Moreover, at the center of the explosion, troops who are directly bombarded by mental power will become mentally confused in an instant, be controlled by my spiritual empire, and rebel on the spot. Isn't this a good feeling? Yuri, you are cruel enough. Sooner or later I will kill you with my own hands. PoortoRich was really angry. He even held a submachine gun himself, beating the rebellious troops while cursing Yuri. Yuri had long been immune to such cruel words and didn't care. Instead, he raised his fingers and a controlled anti-aircraft crawler vehicle quickly came to him. The controlled senior generals and staff, he and 2 members of the psychic force got into the car first. Yuri came to the tracked vehicle, took one last look at the turbulent battle situation, and said coldly, "Because I have been lurking inside the coalition forces for so long, I will give you one last reminder. These are just appetizers. Once the final mind control device of my mind empire is developed, I can use its help to control all humans in the world. No matter how strong your mental resistance, PoortoRich, is, you can't withstand a situation where the whole world is your enemy. It's better to do it as soon as possible. Those who surrender to my spiritual empire can still get the position of founding head of state, why not?" After saying this, Yuri didn't even bother to wait for PoortoRich's reply and got directly into the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle. After being fully loaded, the anti-aircraft tracked vehicle immediately started moving. It chose a gap that had been blasted by the psychic storm before, forced its way out of the headquarters, and swept away outside the map. Damn it! Damn it! This turn of events really caught people off guard, and PoortoRich is now furious. However, those troops who rebelled due to the influence of the psychic storm tightly restrained them. The speed of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle was too fast, and there was no extra energy to track it. They could only watch the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle gradually move forward, fading away, and finally disappearing from sight. After the enemy left, PoortoRich was so angry that he was trembling all over. While shooting, he shouted, "Hit me hard, and all the rebel troops will be wiped out, leaving no one behind." Rumble! Rumble! After receiving the urging order, all the soldiers and tanks on the scene opened fire like crazy. Almost all the troops in the general headquarters mobilized at this moment, and surrounded these rebel troops on 3 levels inside and 3 outside. The psychic storm is very destructive to buildings, but the number of troops controlled within the core range is relatively small after all. Even if they fight bravely and fearlessly, they will soon be submerged in the sea of people and tanks. All rebel forces were wiped out. Hoo-hoo. The war situation was finally calmed down, but looking at the dilapidated and chaotic headquarters, PoortoRich's annoyance remained undiminished. He was breathing heavily and his body was trembling. In this battle, the coach personally participated in the battle. He was even seriously injured before the battle. Now he was injured. While he was breathing, the blood on his arm flowed down the submachine gun and rolled down to the hot ground. One drop, everyone felt a little unbearable when they heard it. "Coach, you go for treatment first, the injury is too serious," a senior general comforted him. But PoortoRich glared back fiercely, "Treatment? What else do I think about treatment? Look at the situation here, how bad is it?" Cough cough. This shout seemed to arouse PoortoRich's injury. He couldn't help coughing twice, and even spurted out some blood droplets, which was particularly eye-catching and dazzling. Yuri. Very good. Rich, have reached the stage of being a coach, but I rarely suffer such big losses. Just wait for me, what kind of spiritual empire, sooner or later I will wipe them all out for you. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 418. Yuri resented Wang Ling for disrupting all his plans, causing his identity to be revealed in advance, and launched a psychic storm to escape. And why doesn't Coach Rich hate it? The battle for hegemony that was originally destined to be won was about to end, but something like this suddenly happened. Yuri's betrayal, let alone the front line, the losses in the headquarters alone were too great. The destructive power of the psychic storm was really shocking. It destroyed a large number of buildings in the general headquarters, and also wiped out a large number of soldiers and tanks in the general headquarters in disguise. Of course, the most serious losses were those of the senior generals. One senior general was controlled by the psychic troops, 2 were shocked to death by Yuri's shockwave, and another senior general died in the chaos due to the rebellion of the troops after the psychic storm. 4 senior generals died before and after. This is a great impact on the overall coalition forces. It's an unbearable pain. You know, if these senior generals are placed on the front-line battlefield, they are all generals who can stand alone and can lead a large coalition base to fight against the Allies. In addition, the deaths of those staff at the General Command Post also made Coach Rich particularly heartbroken. Although those staff members were not as high status as the senior generals, but they were able to stay and work at the headquarters because they were the capable subordinates of Coach Rich. As a result, they all died under the shock wave. Looking at the messy headquarters, Coach Chi's heart was bleeding. "Chief, take care of yourself." When Coach Rich was angry, several medical staff rushed here and treated Coach Rich on the spot. Although Coach Rich himself is an elite-level warrior and has the ability to heal himself in the Red Alert world, as a coach, his seriously injured appearance made everyone a little worried. During the treatment, a senior general also said with relief, "Coach, the general headquarters has suffered heavy losses, which will be sad for everyone, but the great luck among misfortunes is that we have now faced this disaster at the minimum cost." Coach Rich was also a little curious about this statement. He turned his head to look at him and asked, "Why do you say that?" The senior general explained, "Coach, Yuri has great ambitions and a very thorough plan. If his plan is implemented smoothly, I am afraid he will quietly control most of our team leaders and commanders, and even you. It is possible that they could all be controlled. When our army defeated the Allied forces and suffered losses, there would suddenly be a collective riot. At that time, I am afraid that the Allied forces would also suffer a disaster." However, his plan was disrupted. Yuri had to be exposed in advance. Although he caused a lot of damage to us, compared to what he planned, it was already the best result and the smallest price. After the catastrophe, it was rare for the senior general to be able to calmly judge these situations. After hearing this, Coach Rich finally felt better. He took a long breath and sighed, "In the end, we still have to thank Lewicki and his captain who first tipped us off. Without those reminders, I might not have thought of it. We need to hone our spiritual strength." In this turmoil, the person who first noticed the rebellion of the psychic troops and started to take the initiative should be the same person, right? It's entirely possible. This soldier has made a great contribution. The senior general smiled and tried his best to comfort Coach Rich after the disaster. When it came to the front line, after Coach Rich finished speaking, he immediately became nervous. "By the way, how is the front line? Hurry back to the command post, I want to know the current battle situation." As he spoke, Coach Rich was about to continue working hard, but a medical staff stopped him. "Chief, you are seriously injured now. You need to rest more. It is not suitable to work so day and night. Get away." "How long has it been and I still have time to rest?" But Coach Rich didn't buy it. With his seriously injured body, he pulled him aside and then walked away, walking faster than normal. The trot of the infantry was a little faster, and it seemed that they were really anxious. Naturally, other high-ranking generals hurried to follow. When the group entered the command post, all the staff who had died before had now disappeared, leaving only an empty command post. But the three-dimensional display device on the controller in the command post was completely dark and stopped functioning. "What's going on?" Coach Rich asked. A senior general replied, "It should have been affected by Yuri's psychic storm. It blew up a large number of our power plants and the radar was also greatly affected." Coach Richie was a little impatient. "Why don't you repair and rebuild quickly? The dignified headquarters can't contact the front line. Isn't it ridiculous?" Yes, after receiving the order, the senior general hurriedly left and delivered a series of orders. Not long after, all the engineering troops in the entire general headquarters were dispatched, doing their best to repair all the damaged buildings in the base and build power plants. In addition, a group of temporarily dispatched staff entered the command post and were busy with other trivial tasks. At this point, the post-disaster reconstruction work has begun in an orderly manner within the general headquarters. There is no need for Coach Rich to give orders and monitor these one by one. While other staff are busy, Coach Rich just stands in front of the control panel, puts his hands on it, closes his eyes, and tries to keep himself as calm as possible. A senior general also comforted him, "Commander, you don't have to worry too much." Before Yuri showed his fangs, we watched the electronic video and found out that the troops at Base 15 had discovered the rebellion of the psychic troops and temporarily suspended the attack. Are we going to do a full sweep? Their noses are even more sensitive than ours. If we deal with them in advance, there shouldn't be much loss on the front lines. Coach Rich took a long breath and said leisurely, "Yes, this is also a great blessing among misfortunes. We have a genius in the coalition. However, his approach is too direct, and there will be a lot of trouble in the early stage. The effect, but in the later stage, it is very likely to force the psychic troops to jump over the wall. This is what I am most worried about." The repair work was still going on. After a long time, the radar was finally repaired, the power was barely supplied, and the three-dimensional display in the command post finally had an image again. Coach Rich's eyes lit up and he quickly checked. At this time, the suppression of the front lines had reached an intense stage. Under the large-scale activities of the Wolf Group, almost all the psychic troops who followed the battle were wiped out. Wang Ling also followed Yan Tian to the number 8 base and began to persuade and rescue. "Okay. It seems it's not too late, all the major bases are still alive." Coach Rich breathed a sigh of relief, and then hurriedly wanted to contact the front-line troops. However, the radio channel had just been debugged, and there was a lot of chatter and noise coming from it. No matter how much Coach Rich shouted, no sound came back. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 419. Li Wiki. Li Wiki. Call me back when you hear it. Logo ER. Logo ER. I heard the reply. Cao Fa. Cao Fa. Answer. Can't any of you frontline commanders hear the sound? Ah. Electronic video was restored, but radio communications were still damaged and could not be repaired. Coach Rich kept shouting for a long time, but every time it was just a babble of noise, unable to contact the frontline troops at all. Coach Rich was so angry that he gritted his teeth. What are you doing for food? Repair it quickly, even the basics we can't even make contact, so this fight is a fart. Yes. All the staff took the order and got busy together with the engineers. A senior general looked at the electronic map and said puzzledly, "Commander, look at the situation, the rebellion of the psychic troops does not seem to have caused much losses to our frontline troops, and it has been almost wiped out. Why are you still like this, in a hurry?" Coach Rich took a few deep breaths, barely suppressed his inner anger, and replied, "Now is actually the most dangerous time. Those who have been cleared are basically the psychic troops who fought with the field team. It is easy to observe and eliminate them from the electronic map. What I am most worried about is that some psychic troops like Yuri have sneaked into the command post. They are very likely to control the commander, and then bring harm to the entire base. The soldiers are brainwashed and ultimately achieve the goal of rebellion. It's entirely possible. The senior general gritted his teeth and then asked, "But coach, look at the electronic video. The team leader of Base 15 has already started negotiations at Base 8. It seems that the commander of Base 8 has been under control, he knew about it and tried to rescue it. And after rescuing Commander number 8, I will surely be able to learn from him the specific list of commanders who were under control and rescue them one by one. Isn't this a healthy development?" PoortoRich sighed, shook his head and asked, "Imagine if you were lurking in the enemy army and controlled one of the generals, but it was later exposed and it was only a matter of time before you were found out. You can't escape and you will inevitably die. At this time what will you do?" The senior general thought for a while and replied, "It is impossible to surrender, and it is impossible to escape. If I am forced into a hurry, then I can use the general's influence to cause the greatest damage to the enemy as much as possible, a degree of destruction." Hiss. "Coach, you mean?" Thinking of this, the senior general finally realized the coach's concerns. The coach also nodded with an ugly expression and did not say any more. He just gritted his teeth and stared at the electronic video, waiting for the development of the situation. From the observation in the electronic video, it didn't take long for Wang Ling to persuade the leader of the field team who was blocking the road at Base 8, and they entered the command post together. What happened inside can't be seen in the electronic video, but you can basically guess the results. Sure enough, not long after, Wang Ling and others exited safely, apparently successfully rescuing the commander. Afterwards, a group of people began to move their positions and drove towards Base 6. After spending some time, they broke into the command post again. During this process, other bases also began to take action, surrounding bases number 1 and number 12. But after a period of negotiation, something changed suddenly. In the electronic video, a large number of engineers suddenly appeared in the two bases, and they frantically dismantled almost all the buildings in the base. In the end, even the command post exploded. The psychic troops actually controlled the commander and destroyed the entire base. And then died together with the commander. It's true, they are both dead. These members of the psychic army are so cruel, the senior generals who had guessed the result were startled. When others saw this scene, they were also filled with anger, gnashing their teeth, and wanted to pull out those psychics right away. It's like the troops came to shoot them en masse. PoortoRich, who had anticipated the scene for a long time, was so annoyed that his whole body was shaking, but he didn't say anything more. He just closed his eyes and suppressed the anger. Now, even if he gets anxious and angry, it will be of no use. From the electronic video observation, the fire of rebellion in the front-line psychic troops has been extinguished. Although Wang Ling and those commanders' methods were too direct and violent, forcing the last two psychic troops to die together and destroying two bases, the front-line troops can solve it on their own. This result is the best and the lowest cost. Yes. Coach. Coach. Chief, if you hear me, please say something back. If you hear me, please say something back. At this moment, a burst of noise suddenly came from the radio in the general command post, and then finally a response came from the front-line commander. Hearing the sound, PoortoRich's eyes lit up and he quickly responded, "You can hear it. Commander 6, are you Lovsky, right? Have the members of the psychic force in Base 6 been dealt with?" He was questioning, but on the other end of the radio, Major General Lovsky ignored him at all. After a while, he even started shouting again. "Coach. Chief. If you hear it, please answer it. If you hear it, please answer it. Chief. Chief. How are you doing there now? You should reply. Boom. As soon as he heard these shouts, Coach Rich was filled with anger. He punched the control panel with his fist and cursed, "Trash! How long has this been going on? Why haven't the radio communications been repaired yet? Coach, it's coming soon. We have entered the final debugging stage. We will be in contact with the front line soon," a staff member hurriedly replied. There was no way, the front line couldn't hear what was said here, so Coach Rich simply fell silent. However, Base 6 kept shouting, but did not receive a reply for a long time. They started talking without even closing the communication. Is it possible that the coach has been controlled? It's not impossible. Ordinary members of the psychic force can control me. As the leader, it is entirely possible for Yuri to control the commander. Moreover, the psychic force has rebelled and the battlefield has been in chaos for so long, but we have never been able to get the total victory. Without any instructions from the command, or even asking, something may have happened. This. Hearing this, Coach Rich smiled inexplicably and shook his head. Uncertain. And just when he thought that Commander Number 6 had underestimated him, another voice came from the radio: "If the coach has been controlled, even if he is a puppet, he should have responded by now." But now, there is no answer. It is most likely that something unexpected happened in the headquarters. In short, it should not be controlled by Yuri. Moreover, I felt that there was something wrong with Yuri from the beginning. The back of his head I can vaguely see the betrayal and it is unreliable, so before joining the decisive battle, I asked General Lewicki to warn the coach to be careful with Yuri. If the coach really took this sentence to heart and was prepared, he should not let Yuri he succeeded. But on the other hand, if the coach didn't take this warning to heart at all and has been poisoned now, that would be very disappointing. This kid is very brave. He dares to say that to me. Coach Rich couldn't laugh or cry when he heard this. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 420. It seems that this old guy like me has not disappointed these young people. After scolding, Coach Rich smiled and shook his head. Although Wang Ling didn't know that the coach was listening to him, and his tone was a bit rude, in fact, instead of being angry, the coach was somewhat appreciative. The young man who spoke was the first to see that Yuri had something to say. Maybe it's Wang Ling who asked Lewicki to bring me the message. Judging from his tone, that's it. This young man is not a simple man. Although he talks a little loudly, judging from his initial actions of seeing through the rebellion of the psychic army and eliminating the psychic army step by step, he does have such talk. The confidence. In addition, some senior generals nodded, and their words were full of praise for Wang Ling. After all, because of Wang Ling's existence, the coalition forces were saved from a disaster this time. Even Coach Rich had to pay attention to this credit. Of course, they were not the only ones with an appreciative attitude. The voice of Major General Lovsky came over the radio: "You are the one who has the foresight." Another person then asked, "Then what should we do now? Are we waiting for news?" And Wang Ling's subsequent answer was even more ridiculous: "Wait? I can't wait any longer. What if the coach is really that stupid and gets murdered? Hurry and prepare an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle for me. I have to rush their headquarters." After hearing this, Coach Rich and several other senior generals glanced at each other and asked, "Am I so stupid?" Immediately, a senior general reprimanded from a distance, "This kid speaks freely." "Coach," just at this moment, a staff member reported, "the radios have been completely repaired and can communicate with the front-line troops." Coach Rich nodded, immediately connected to the radio at Base 6, and cursed, "I heard everything you said. You are so courageous, you secretly scolded me for being stupid behind my back." Coach. Chief. On the other end of the radio, several people's voices came out together, sounding very surprised and pleasantly surprised, and then Lovsky asked, "Coach, are you now?" Coach Rich replied in a deep voice, "Don't worry, I'm still me and I'm not being controlled. Yuri really betrayed the coalition forces. Frontline, Base Command Post Number 6. After hearing the coach's answer, whether it was Wang Ling, Major General Lovsky, or the soldiers of Yan Tian and Huo Group, they all breathed a sigh of relief. Although Wang Ling is a hero, his current military rank is still only a lieutenant colonel after all, but now he is stepping in, taking the call before Major General Lovsky, and asked, "Coach, how is the general headquarters doing now? How did you know that Yuri rebelled? And how is Yuri now? If he can't control you, there will definitely be a battle afterwards. Can you tell me the detailed process?" Okay. Speaking of which, the reason I was able to escape this disaster was because your kid's initial reminder was a big help. To be honest, Coach Rich didn't want to recall the process of Yuri's rebellion. If others asked, he wouldn't bother to recount those trivial processes. However, Wang Ling is an exception. After this difficulty, even Coach Rich had to admire Wang Ling's uniqueness and ruthless vision. He suppressed his anger and recounted the entire process of Yuri's rebellion, including every sentence Yuri said. The words were repeated to Wang Ling in detail on the radio. If any other commanders learn about this, they will definitely pop their eyes out. As a coach, he actually had the patience to repeat these contents to a field team leader. Taking Lovsky as the representative, looking at his current expression of seeing a ghost, you can see how far-fetched this is. But it happened that such a fantasy happened like this. After talking about all this process, Coach Rich sighed and concluded, that terrifying psychic storm tore the headquarters into a mess, and 4 senior generals died or were controlled. The front line. 2 bases of the troops were demolished and blown up. Yuri's rebellion brought a lot of losses to our coalition forces. Thinking about it makes me gnash my teeth and hate it so much. However, this is compared to Yuri's initial "the plan is coming, but the price is already minimal." As the first person to see through this, you have made a great contribution this time. When the battle situation settles down, your reward will not be less. Being able to have Commander-in-Chief Richie personally commit to it, you can imagine how great the benefits will be to Wang Ling. However, during the war, the rewards in the army were nothing more than having more subordinates and being promoted to military ranks. In Wang Ling's opinion, it was just that. He didn't take it to heart. He just asked in turn, "Coach, since if there is a rebellion here, then there will definitely be a battle between us and Yuri's army. But do you know where the headquarters of Yuri's Soul Empire is? Do you know how powerful this so-called Soul Empire is?" Wang Ling did not save face for Coach Rich at all. When he asked these questions, Coach Rich felt a little embarrassed. "To be honest, I don't understand this either. However, from what Yuri said at the headquarters, judging from the strength shown, the strength of this spiritual empire is probably not weaker than that of the Allies, and may even be stronger. However, they are hiding in the dark and secretly developing, and we really don't know where their base is. This kind of enemy that you don't understand is very scary. So, Coach, what are your plans next?" Wang Ling continued to ask. Coach Rich replied, "Originally, the battle for hegemony was coming to an end, and I wanted to rest after the fight, but Yuri's sudden rebellion caught me off guard. To be honest, I am a little confused now. Wang Ling, tell me what you think." In his capacity as the head coach, he actually asked a field team leader such a question in the end. Yan Tian, Major General Lovsky, and the surrounding fire team soldiers all widened their eyes. When Coach Rich asked him such a general question, even if he couldn't give an answer, Wang Ling would be able to brag for a lifetime. However, Wang Ling was able to answer, "Coach, special treatment will be given under special circumstances. There is no need to continue this battle for hegemony for the time being. Not only that, in the future, we may even unite with the Allies to fight against the Empire of Mind." What? Wang Ling really couldn't stop talking. As soon as he finished speaking, Coach Rich started shouting, "Are you kidding, United Allied Forces? Do you think this is possible?"